In Next.js, middleware is one of the first steps in the request response pipeline, right after next config is processed. It lets you to intercept requests before they reach your page or route handler, allowing you to reject, rewrite, redirect, or modify them. To add a middleware, create a middleware.js or TS file in the src folder and define a middleware function. This function handles requests and returns a next response.next object. You can only have one middleware per project, and by default, it will catch all requests, including static files. You can filter which requests it handles by adding an export const config with a matcher array. Let's take a closer look. Okay, I'm in the project. The project is running, and I've opened this middleware, as you can see here, and it has the minimum possible value or code that a middleware can have. As you can see, it's simply returning a next response.next, which will simply send the request to the next level. It means that whatever users is requesting, for example, it can be a page or a resource, a file, is going to pass the request to that file if it is in the next step of the pipeline. There might be cases that you have some configurations in the next.config.json file, and the next step would be in that file, in that configuration. But in our case, as I said, we don't have that configuration, so the next level would be to accessing that resource and returning that resource to the clients. This middleware function can also take a parameter. We can call it request. You can put whatever you want, but the first parameter of this middleware is a request. And the type of this request is a simple request that comes from the standard fetch API interface, as you can see here. But also you can use the enhanced request version, which Next.js offers, and it comes from this package, Next Server. I can import it like this. So in our case, request is actually of type Next request, which is very similar to request itself, but has some other properties. For example, Next URL, that makes our life easier to have some functionalities that request itself doesn't. For the first example, I'm going to show or log every request that after page load happens and are passing through this middleware. So what I can do is to console log them, log all the requests.url. So if I open the dropdown, this autocomplete, you can see that there are a lot of properties that this request has. For example, URL, or you can see next URL. As I said, you can get the query string from next URL. Simple. It has some functions, form data, and almost everything that if you remember in the routing section, in the routing video, I explained. And this is exactly that request that you can have, and you can perform actions on it. So request URL, let's see what's going on, what's inside it. I open the console, and if I clean the console, I try to refresh the page. And as you see, after loading the page, there are a bunch of requests coming to the server. The first one is, of course, the page itself. Then it's asking for some CSS, JS files here, and also favicon, as you can see. So these are like static files, and this one is the dynamic route or dynamic file. Not actually dynamic file, but the page itself or the main document, but still is coming through this middleware, and I can get them here. So I'm kind of have control over every request that is coming before reaching to that resource itself. Now what I can do with that? So there are some use cases that middlewares are good for, such as authentication or authorization or server-side redirection. About the redirection part, I already explained how we can use middlewares to redirect users to another place. We can also try it later here. We can also use middlewares to log some data. If you have any kind of logging dashboard or system in another place or in your project, it's one of the best places that you can perform those kind of logging or analytics actions. But you have to be careful about using middlewares. If you put a lot of logics here, it's going to be slow and it affects your performance, your application performance and speed. So be careful about that. You should not put a lot of logics or complex logics in the middleware. Keep it simple and put as much as you really require in this file. Now I'm going to play around with that. Maybe we can go with the redirect one that I have already explained before. And the idea of redirecting the request to another place is to check the request if it has some conditions. Then we decide based on some logics that we might have to redirect the users to another place. For example, if you have some protected routes in your project and you don't want users to access if they are not logged in or they don't have any kind of authentication tokens, you can redirect and prevent them, and this is one of the best places that you can perform that. Let's try it. I add something like a protected page pattern here. I say const protected page or route like this. it can work. I don't have this route, but imagine I do have. So for me, protected routes are those that start with /admin. Then now I can check the request URL, and if it has /admin or it starts with /admin, I can redirect the users to a 404 or to a 401, which is unauthorized request. Let's try it. I say request, or if, yeah, as you can see, it's filling for me, but there are some problems here. I can get rid of this for now. And the path name is something that, for example, you in here in this request, you see that there is a protocol, then the domain port / something. The slash starting from slash, the first slash after the domain port is the path name. In this case, it's _next static chunk webpack.js, not query string itself. So if the path name has /admin into it, I'm redirecting the user to login page. Of course, I have to check if the user has the token itself, but imagine I want to redirect everyone to login. Let's try it. The project is running. I can simply say, I put /admin like this. And then as you can see, I'm getting an error because of too much trust into GitHub Copilot. And what I have to do is I have to put an absolute URL instead of this relative URL. Here, what I can do is I could go with a new URL like this, and then go this time I can trust the GitHub Copilot because it has this the origin that has like HTTP localhost 3000, or if you are in a domain x.com or whatever, and then I'm attaching that, I'm generating that URL that ends with /login. Let's try it again. I go with admin, and as you can see, I got redirected to login here. I maybe can zoom. Let me get rid of these extensions. So if I zoom a little, so you can see that I have redirected to login because of this code. So this is one of the best places that you can redirect users. There might be other scenarios or logics. For example, you might have a database of all the routes or all the old routes, and you want to redirect users to a new route. For example, that page or that URL doesn't exist anymore, and you want to move that or transfer the users to the new URL. Let's say I have a database or collection of all the old URLs, const old URLs, and I can say like this, let's trust this GitHub Copilot again, and to generate some MAC data or MAC URLs, I can say like this. And then now I can put some other logics here. Let's use the completion here, and it's giving me a type error because this type is old URLs is of type old, then new, the value new. It's not of type record, so I can change it to type record of type string, and the value would be a string. Now it's not complaining anymore. So if I have any URL that starts with old, I'm going to redirect them to new. I know I don't have the new URL, but that's fine. I'm just trying to show something here. So I go with old, and you see it immediately redirects me to new. Old to new to. I hope you can see it. Also for the first example here, and it's good to access the request headers, something that we are expecting, and it's better and in this example it's better to be checked. For example, I will try to check if there's any header that has token with a value. Doesn't matter the value now. I can add other conditions to check if the value is something valid. Then I can skip redirecting users, but if there's nothing, I can redirect the users. I can say if request.headers.get authorization doesn't exist, like this, then try to redirect users. And in our case, it doesn't exist, so it's going to redirect me anyway. Let me try to go to admin again. I should type admin, and it's redirecting me to login. Let's try to mock the headers here. What I can do, I have an extension like this. So this extension is going to add some headers to the requests manually, just for mocking or testing purposes. I can go with authorization. I can put hello here. It doesn't matter because we are not checking for the value for now, but you get the idea. Then I will change one of these. For example, here I can change it to 3000. And now if I try to send a request, I'm actually adding or injecting this authorization header to the request header. So if I try to access the admin again, let's see what will happen. This time I'm not redirected to admin. I remain on the admin page because now I have this token and the logic here is not being called or hit. Now I can also check the authorization token here. I can add another function. For example, I can say if this header is not valid, get authorization. I can wrap it like this, is valid token, or like this. If it's not a valid token, then redirect the user. I can get rid of that. The other if here, I can wrap it with brackets like this. Okay. Then I don't have this function. I can implement it. It's better to put it in another module. And there are libraries that can do the validation for you. For example, I'm considering that this token is of type JWT. I can use JWT type library to validate the token. I'm not covering that in this video, but in the future we are going to have another video about authentication. But for now, imagine if the cookie or the header for authorization that is passed is 1, 2, 3, 4, then it's a valid token for me. Otherwise, it's not valid. So I'm going to redirect the users that are requesting for admin page, which is identified or defined here, to login page. Let's try it. I will try to go to admin. I got redirected to login, and the reason is that the token that I'm passing or that header is not 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's change it. Now if I try to go to admin again, this time I'm not redirected. I stay in the admin page, as you can see. You can also set or modify the response headers or cookies here. Since we are directly returning the next response.next, I can also keep it in a constant like this, response, const response equal next response. Then at the end, I'm going to return it. But in between, I can do whatever I want with the response. For example, I can add a custom header like this. Or I can say, I would like to set a cookie. I go with response.cookies.set. Then I can say cookie name, cookie value, like this, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Let's try it again. If I go to home page this time, I don't want to be redirected or catched with one of these if statements. I go to the home page, and now I'm expecting these headers and this cookie to be in the response. If I refresh again, I'm going to show it to you in the network panel. So if I zoom, I refresh. The first request is the main document request, and in the response headers, you can see that X custom header hello exists, as well as the cookies. Let's scroll up a little, and the cookies are here. And the cookie I have just created is cookie 1, cookie name 1, 2, 3, and cookie value 1, 2, 3, which is set into user's browser. I can also respond to the users with different status codes. For example, here, let's return something like next response.json, like this, and let's see what will happen. And you see, I'm returning a JSON. It's like doing a route handlers, if you remember, job here. But it's possible, and the reason that I just showed it to you is to tell you that it's possible. I can also go with returning a new response, hello world, and I want to send a specific status code like status code 401. Let's refresh again. I'm getting the response, but if you take a look into the network, you can see that I'm getting 401 here. And these are all kind of stuff that you can play around and have them in the middleware. Also in Next.js 15, there's a possibility of writing unit tests for middleware. Before that, it was a little bit difficult to write test cases for middleware, but from now on, it's possible. It's in the experimental level. You have to enable some flags in the next config to have that. But for now, I will skip it, and as soon as we reach to testing section in this course, I will explain how we can write tests for middlewares as well. Then the last topic that I'm going to explain about middlewares is the fact that how to filter all the requests that are passing through middleware. Let me clean up this a little, so I don't want to overwhelm you with a lot of codes. And if you remember, by default, Next.js Middleware is going to grab all the requests that are coming to the server. But if we don't want to handle or grab all the requests here, it is possible to filter them, and by exporting a constant called config that has a matcher inside it. Let's try to do it. Export const config equal an object that has matcher, And this matcher can be a string or an array of strings. And if you put something here around that starts with slash something, then this matcher, which acts like a pattern, is going to be the filter for our middleware. It means Next.js is going to send any request that matches this pattern that we have defined to the middleware function. For example, I can say if there's any request starts with /admin, then this middleware should take it. Otherwise, if there's any other request, for example, a static file, I don't want to see it. Let's try and make sure that it's working. I'm trying to log all the requests that are coming into it. I put URL, so I want to see any URL that is hitting and is coming to the server. Let me run the project again. I go to the home page. So no logging here, but if I go to admin/admin like this, you can see it hits my console log here, and my middleware just grabs that. In this way, I could filter out a lot of unwanted requests that are coming. Can be helpful if you have a lot of assets and you don't need them actually. Go ahead and use this config. You can also exclude some other URLs here instead of adding any kind of URL that you want to accept. For this case, you can use regular expressions. For example, I copied this example from the Next documents. And the purpose of this is to exclude any kind of static files like images or favicons, robot.tsx, to exclude them from being processed by this middleware. So if I try to run it again, I'm expecting JS, CSS, and document to be passed, but not favicon, because the favicon is excluded here. Let's try and see what will happen. And I think I have to rerun the project. Let me rerun. And I refresh. And it's working actually because I forgot that I've added also static files or a static folder. So considering this, JS and CSS files are also excluded, but all other kind of requests are going to be passed, including the document request, the main request itself, like this. So you can see the homepage request comes to the middleware here. Of course, this pattern is excluding some of them. You can also have something that includes it. For example, I want to see a request to favicon. Like this. I cut this here and I put it here. Let's try. So I start the project, npm run dev. And it's complaining because the matcher is not starting with slash. So it must start with a slash. Otherwise, as you can see, the app crashes. Let me try again. Now it's working fine. If I refresh, you can see the request to favicon is passed through the middleware, as well as other requests like the main document request here. So I think that's enough for middlewares. If you have any other questions, please feel free to ask me in the comments. I will try to answer as soon as possible. So thank you and see you in the next ones.